The discovery. Chief Science Officer Zarathal stood in the observation deck of the Keltharian research vessel Eternal Wisdom, staring at the holographic display with all four of her eyes wide in disbelief. The data streaming across the screen should have been impossible. It violated every principle of technological development that the Keltharian Empire had established over their 10,000 years of spacefaring civilization. The humans had found it. After 3 years of searching through the debris field in the outer rim of their solar system, they had finally located the wreckage of the Morning Star, a Keltharian scout ship that had vanished without a trace 47 years ago. That alone would have been concerning enough. But what the humans were doing with their discovery made Zarathal's primary heart beat faster with something between fear and a strange kind of fascination. They were taking it apart. Not just examining it or cataloging it the way a primitive species should approach technology centuries beyond their understanding. They were systematically dismantling the warp core piece by piece, and they were understanding it. In just 6 weeks, the human team had made more progress in comprehending Keltharian warp technology than most species achieved in 200 years of study. Zarathal turned to her assistant, a younger Keltharian named Moreth who had been monitoring the human communications. His scales had taken on a pale blue color, which indicated deep concern among their kind. The translations were accurate, he said quietly. The human leader, someone called Dr. Elena Vasquez, has identified the quantum flux chamber and understands its basic function. They are now working on the dimensional folding mechanism. That is impossible, Zarathal whispered. Even she, after 70 years of studying warp technology, had taken 15 years to fully comprehend the dimensional folding mechanism. These humans had been a spacefaring species for barely 2 centuries. They still used primitive fusion drives for most of their vessels. Their furthest colony was only 12 light-years from their home world. They should not even recognize the components they were looking at, let alone understand their purpose. Yet the data did not lie. The human team had set up their research facility in a place they called the Nevada Desert, a barren stretch of land on their home world. The facility was called Area 52, apparently an upgrade from some earlier research location. Through the Keltharian surveillance systems hidden in the debris itself, Zarathal could watch everything the humans did. She had been watching for 6 weeks now, and each day brought new impossibilities. The discovery of the Morning Star had happened almost by accident. A human mining operation in the Kuiper Belt had been searching for rare minerals when their sensors detected an unusual energy signature embedded in a large asteroid. When they investigated, they found the remains of a ship unlike anything in human records. The vessel had collided with the asteroid decades ago, and over time, space dust and ice had partially buried it. But the warp core, built with Keltharian durability in mind, had remained mostly intact. The human government had immediately classified the discovery as top secret. Within a week, they had transported the entire wreckage back to Earth. Within 2 weeks, they had assembled a team of their brightest scientists. And within 3 weeks, they had begun the work that now kept Zarathal awake during her rest cycles. Dr. Elena Vasquez was the leader of the human team. Zarathal had studied her background thoroughly. The woman was 52 years old by human counting, which made her relatively young by Keltharian standards. She had 3 advanced degrees in physics, engineering, and what humans called computer science. She had published over 200 research papers and had been responsible for several breakthroughs in human fusion technology. But none of that explained what Zarathal was witnessing. Elena stood in the center of the research facility, surrounded by holographic displays that showed different components of the warp core. She was small by human standards, barely reaching the shoulders of her male colleagues. Her hair had turned gray, which humans considered a sign of aging. She wore simple clothing, a white coat over casual pants and a shirt. Nothing about her appearance suggested the genius that Zarathal now reluctantly recognized. The human scientist gestured at one of the displays, and her team gathered around her. Her voice came through the surveillance system clearly. The quantum flux chamber does not just contain the energy, she said. It shapes it. Look at these patterns etched into the interior surface. They are not decorative. They are a form of programming. The energy itself is being instructed on how to behave. One of her colleagues, a tall man named Dr. James Chin, nodded enthusiastically. That explains why our initial power calculations were wrong. We were treating it like a conventional containment system. But this is more like a language. The chamber is talking to the energy. Exactly, Elena replied. And if we can understand that language, we can replicate it. Not copy it, replicate it. We can build our own version using materials and methods we already have. Zarathal felt a chill run through her body. This was the moment she had been dreading. The humans were not content to simply study Keltharian technology. They intended to recreate it with their own hands, using their own understanding. This was forbidden by every law of technological development. Species were supposed to advance gradually, building on their own discoveries, developing their own solutions. To leap forward like this, to steal the achievements of a civilization thousands of years more advanced, it was wrong. It was dangerous. Yet she could not look away. The humans worked with an intensity that Zarathal had rarely seen even among her own people. They did not rest for long periods. They took short breaks to consume food and stimulants they called coffee, then returned immediately to their work. They argued constantly, their voices rising in heated debates about theories and calculations. But these arguments were not destructive. They seemed to push each of them toward better ideas, sharper insights. Elena herself barely slept. Zarathal watched as the human woman worked 18 hours a day, sometimes 20. She took meals at her workstation. She covered the walls of her private office with papers and notes, creating a visual map of her thoughts that seemed chaotic but clearly made sense to her. When she did sleep, it was for brief periods in a small room attached to the facility. The Keltharian observer began to notice patterns in how the humans approached the technology. They did not work linearly, starting from basic principles and building up systematically the way Keltharian scientists would. Instead, they attacked problems from multiple directions simultaneously. Elena would assign different teams to study different components, even components that were not yet understood. Then she would bring everyone together to share what they had learned, looking for connections and patterns that emerged from the chaos. It should not have worked. It violated every principle of scientific method that Zarathal had been taught. But it did work. The human teams made intuitive leaps that would have taken Keltharian scientists years of careful calculation to reach. They saw patterns in the technology that seemed obvious once pointed out but had taken Keltharian researchers decades to discover. In the third week, Elena's team made a breakthrough with the dimensional folding mechanism. This was the heart of warp technology, the component that allowed a vessel to compress the space in front of it and expand the space behind it, effectively moving faster than light without actually exceeding light speed. The Keltharian Empire had taken 3,000 years to perfect this technology. Their greatest scientists had spent lifetimes studying it. Wars had been fought over access to it. The humans figured out the basic principles in 17 days. Dr. Chin was the one who made the crucial discovery. He had been studying the geometric patterns within the folding mechanism when he noticed something that everyone else had missed. These patterns are not random, he said during one of their group meetings. They follow a mathematical sequence. It is similar to what we call the Fibonacci sequence but more complex. Three-dimensional instead of linear. Elena immediately understood the significance. If the patterns follow a mathematical sequence, we can predict them. We can extend them. We can modify them. She turned to her team with an expression that Zarathal had learned to recognize as excitement mixed with determination. We can build our own version that follows the same mathematical rules but uses our own materials and our own construction methods. The Keltharian observer immediately sent a priority message back to the Empire. The humans have achieved a fundamental understanding of warp technology. They are now moving toward independent recreation. Request immediate guidance on how to proceed. The response came 3 days later, transmitted across the vast distances of space through the same warp technology the humans were now learning to understand. The High Council was in emergency session. Some members argued for immediate military intervention. Destroy the human facility before they could complete their work. Destroy their research. Destroy all evidence of Keltharian technology. Other council members argued for a diplomatic approach. Offer the humans a deal. Share some technology officially in exchange for destroying what they had learned from the Morning Star. But the majority of the council voted for a third option. Wait and observe. Let the humans continue their work. See how far they could actually get. After all, understanding the principles of warp technology was one thing. Actually building a functioning warp drive from scratch was something else entirely. It required materials that were rare in the galaxy, manufacturing techniques that took centuries to perfect, and an understanding of quantum mechanics at a level that most species never achieved. The humans would fail eventually. The Council was certain of this. And when they did, the Keltharian Empire would be there to offer assistance, to guide them toward proper development, to ensure they became allies rather than threats. It was the same approach the Empire had taken with dozens of other species over the millennia. It always worked. Zarathal was not so certain. She had been watching these humans for 6 weeks now. She had seen how they worked, how they thought, how they refused to accept limitations that other species considered absolute. There was something different about them. something that made her wonder if the council's confidence might be misplaced. In the 5th week, Elena's team began fabricating their own components. They used materials found on Earth, elements that were relatively common in their solar system. They employed manufacturing techniques that were crude by Keltharian standards but surprisingly effective. They made mistakes constantly, but they learned from each mistake with frightening speed. The human woman stood in front of her team one evening, after another 18-hour work session, and said something that Zarathal would remember for the rest of her life. "We are not trying to copy their technology," Elena said. "We are trying to understand the universe the same way they do. We are trying to see what they saw. And once we see it, we will build it our way." Those words echoed in Zarathal's mind as she watched the humans work through another night. They were not thieves trying to steal Keltharian achievements. They were explorers who had stumbled upon a map to territories they desperately wanted to reach. And they were willing to work until their bodies collapsed to get there. By the end of the 6th week, the human team had successfully created a miniature quantum flux chamber. It was small, no larger than a human fist, but it worked. When they activated it, it contained and shaped energy exactly the way the Keltharian version did. The efficiency was lower, the stability was questionable, and the power output was minimal. But it worked. Elena held the device in her hands and tears ran down her face. Around her, her team celebrated with loud voices and embraces. They knew what this meant. They had proven that humans could understand and recreate alien technology that was thousands of years more advanced than their own. They had proven that the gap between human capabilities and Keltharian capabilities was not unbridgeable. They had proven that they were not alone in the universe and they were not helpless. Zarathal watched this moment and felt something she had never expected to feel toward a primitive species. She felt respect. And beneath that respect, she felt the first stirrings of fear. Because if humans could do this in 6 weeks, what would they achieve in 6 months? In 6 years? In 60 years? The Keltharian Empire had spent 10,000 years building its civilization, expanding its territory, perfecting its technology. They had done so slowly, carefully, following the natural progression of scientific development. They had believed this was the only way, the proper way, the inevitable way. The humans were teaching them that there might be another path, a faster path, a more chaotic path that terrified Zarathal with its implications. She sent another message to the High Council. The humans have successfully created a functioning quantum flux chamber using their own materials and methods. They are proceeding faster than any projections suggested. Recommend immediate council session to reconsider our approach. As she waited for a response, Zarathal could not stop watching the humans celebrate their achievement. They looked so happy, so proud of what they had accomplished. They had no idea that their success might have just changed the balance of power in the galaxy forever. And they had no idea that the Keltharian Empire was now watching them with a mixture of fascination and growing alarm. The reconstruction. The Keltharian High Council chamber was a marvel of architecture and technology. Built into the heart of a massive space station that orbited their home world, the circular room could hold 500 council members from across the empire. Today every seat was filled. The ambient lighting had been dimmed to a deep blue, which indicated the seriousness of the discussion. In the center of the chamber, a holographic display showed live footage from Earth, where humans continued their impossible work. Grand Chancellor Vector stood at the council podium, his ceremonial robes flowing around his aged form. He had led the Keltharian Empire for 300 years, guiding them through wars, expansions, and first contacts with dozens of species. But never in his long life had he faced a situation quite like this. The humans have now entered the 7th week of their project, he announced, his voice carrying to every corner of the chamber. They have progressed beyond our most pessimistic projections. They are no longer simply studying our technology. They are innovating upon it. Murmurs of disbelief rippled through the assembled council members. On the holographic display, Elena and her team worked in their facility, surrounded by equipment and components that grew more sophisticated with each passing day. The miniature quantum flux chamber they had created now powered a series of experiments that pushed the boundaries of what the council thought possible. Council member Tharwex, a military commander who had won glory in a dozen campaigns, rose from his seat. His scales had flushed a deep red, indicating anger and alarm. Grand Chancellor, we cannot allow this to continue. The humans have violated the most sacred principle of galactic development. They have stolen technology that does not belong to them. They are advancing at a rate that threatens the natural order. I propose immediate military action. Destroy their facility. Destroy their research. Ensure they never speak of what they have learned. Several council members voiced their agreement, but Vector raised his hand for silence. And what then, Commander Tharwax? What happens after we destroy this one facility? Do we truly believe the humans will simply forget what they have discovered? Knowledge, once gained, cannot be erased by weapons. We could destroy every human facility on their planet, kill every scientist who has touched this project, and still the fundamental understanding would remain. Someone would remember. Someone would rebuild. Another council member stood, this one an elderly scientist named Lorana who had served as chief science advisor for 2 centuries. I have reviewed all of Zarathal's reports thoroughly, she said. What disturbs me most is not that the humans are learning our technology. What disturbs me is how they are learning it. They do not follow standard scientific methodology. They do not progress in the linear fashion that every other species follows. They approach problems from multiple angles simultaneously, making intuitive leaps that should require decades of foundation building. She gestured toward the holographic display, and the image zoomed in on Elena's face. The human woman looked exhausted, with dark circles under her eyes and hair that had not been properly groomed in days. Yet her eyes burned with an intensity that Lorana found both admirable and terrifying. This woman, this Dr. Vasquez, she is not exceptional by human standards. She is merely very good. Which means the humans have thousands more like her. Perhaps tens of thousands. What happens when they all turn their attention to our technology? What happens when they share their discoveries with their entire species, as humans are known to do? The council chamber fell silent as the implications sank in. The Keltharian Empire had maintained its dominance through careful control of advanced technology. They shared some discoveries with allied species, always maintaining a significant advantage. But the humans were demonstrating that such control might be impossible to maintain. If one human team could reverse engineer warp technology in weeks, what would stop thousands of human teams from doing the same with every piece of Keltharian technology they encountered? Grand Chancellor Vector made his decision. We will send an ambassador to Earth. Not with weapons but with words. We will offer the humans a choice. They can abandon their current research and accept a formal technology sharing agreement with the Empire, receiving warp technology through proper channels over the next century. Or they can face the consequences of continuing down their current path. And those consequences are? Tharwax demanded. Economic isolation. Military containment. Every species in the galaxy will be informed that humans are dangerous technology thieves who cannot be trusted. They will find themselves alone in the universe, cut off from all trade, all diplomacy, all cooperation. Vector's eyes hardened. Humans may be clever, but they are not self-sufficient. They need resources from other worlds. They need allies. They need their place in the galactic community. We will offer them a path forward that does not require them to be our enemies. The council voted. The decision was unanimous. Within hours, Ambassador Kelran was dispatched to Earth aboard the fastest ship in the Keltharian fleet. His mission was clear. Stop the humans before they went too far. Offer them a reasonable path. And if they refused, make them understand the price of defiance. Kelran arrived at Earth 3 days later. He was a skilled diplomat who had negotiated treaties with 17 different species. He understood how to read alien psychology, how to find pressure points, how to make offers that seemed generous while actually maintaining Keltharian superiority. He had never failed in a negotiation. The human government arranged a meeting at a neutral location, a space station that orbited their moon. Elena was brought from her facility to participate, along with several human political leaders. When Kelran entered the conference room, he took a moment to study the humans carefully. They were smaller than he expected, their bodies soft and fragile looking. They wore simple clothing and carried no visible weapons. They did not look like a species that could threaten the Keltharian Empire. Ambassador Kelran, the human Secretary General said, extending his hand in the human gesture of greeting. We appreciate you coming to discuss this matter. I am Secretary General Adeyemi. This is Dr. Elena Vasquez who leads our research team. We are eager to establish formal relations with the Keltharian Empire. Kelran did not take the offered hand. Instead, he stood at his full height, which was nearly 3 meters tall, and allowed his scales to shift to an intimidating dark purple. I am not here to establish relations, he said coldly. I am here to deliver an ultimatum. Your species has committed a grave violation of galactic law. You have stolen Keltharian technology and are attempting to replicate it without authorization. This cannot be tolerated. Elena stepped forward, and Kelran noticed that she did not seem intimidated by his display. With respect, Ambassador, we did not steal anything. We found the wreckage of a ship that had been abandoned in our solar system for nearly 50 years. We studied what we found. That is not theft. That is discovery. The ship was Keltharian property, Kelran replied. Everything within it remains Keltharian property. You had no right to study it, to dismantle it, or to attempt to replicate its technology. He pulled up a holographic display showing a formal document. However, the High Council recognizes that your actions may have been born from ignorance rather than malice. Therefore, we offer you a path forward. Destroy all research related to the warp drive. Turn over all components from the Morning Star. Accept a formal treaty in which we will share appropriate technology with humanity over the next century, allowing you to develop properly under our guidance. And if we refuse? Secretary General Adeyemi asked quietly. Kelran's scales shifted to a darker shade. Then you will face the consequences. The Keltharian Empire will declare humanity to be a rogue species. Every civilized government in the galaxy will be informed of your theft. You will be excluded from all trade agreements, all diplomatic relations, all access to resources beyond your own small solar system. You will be alone in the universe, surrounded by species who have been warned about your untrustworthiness. The human leaders exchanged glances. Kelran felt a moment of satisfaction. They were beginning to understand their position. They were beginning to see that their cleverness had limits. But then Elena spoke, and her words were not what he expected. Ambassador Kelran, may I ask you a question? How long did it take your people to develop warp technology? The ambassador was surprised by the question but answered honestly. 3,000 years, from initial theoretical work to the first successful warp-capable vessel. It was the greatest achievement of Keltharian science. Elena nodded slowly. 3,000 years. And in that time, how many Keltharian scientists worked on the problem? How many resources were devoted to it? How many failures did you endure before you succeeded? Tens of thousands of scientists, Kelran replied, uncertain where this was leading. Entire planets devoted to research. Countless failures and setbacks. We persevered because we knew the prize was worth any cost. The human woman smiled, but it was not a happy smile. It was the smile of someone who had worked themselves to exhaustion and discovered something profound in the process. Ambassador, we have been working on understanding your warp drive for 7 weeks. 7 weeks. In that time, my team of 47 scientists has achieved what took your civilization 3,000 years. Do you understand what that means? Kelran felt a chill run through his body. It means you have benefited from our work. You are standing on foundations we built over millennia. Without our technology to study, you would still be centuries away from achieving warp capability on your own. Perhaps, Elena acknowledged. Or perhaps it means that humans approach scientific problems differently than Keltharians. Perhaps it means that our chaotic, collaborative, intuitive approach allows us to make leaps that your more methodical approach cannot achieve. She leaned forward, and Kelran saw the fierce intelligence burning in her strange human eyes. Ambassador, I am going to tell you something that will be difficult for you to hear. We are going to complete our warp drive. Not in a century. Not in a year. We are going to complete it in the next 6 weeks. And when we do, it will not be a copy of your technology. It will be our own design, built on principles we discovered ourselves by studying the universe the same way you once did. Oh, you cannot possibly, Kelran began, but Elena cut him off. We already have. She pulled up her own holographic display, showing detailed schematics that made Kelran's eyes widen in shock. We have created our own quantum flux chamber using materials that are abundant in our solar system. We have designed our own dimensional folding mechanism that is actually more efficient than yours because we are not bound by the assumptions your ancestors made 3,000 years ago. We have solved the power distribution problem that your ships still struggle with. In 6 weeks, we will have a functional prototype. In 6 months, we will have a fleet of human ships capable of traveling anywhere in the galaxy. The conference room was absolutely silent. Kelran stared at the schematics, his mind racing to comprehend what he was seeing. The human designs were crude in some ways, lacking the elegance of Keltharian engineering. But they worked. The mathematics was sound. The principles were correct. And in several areas, the humans had actually improved upon Keltharian technology through sheer innovative thinking. This is impossible, he whispered. Secretary General Adeyemi spoke up, his voice firm but not hostile. Ambassador Kelran, we do not wish to be your enemies. We would welcome a relationship with the Keltharian Empire based on mutual respect and cooperation. But we will not accept being treated like children who need your permission to explore the universe. We will not destroy our research. We will not hand over our discoveries. We will not spend a century waiting for you to decide we are ready for technology we can build ourselves. The ambassador felt his carefully constructed negotiating position crumbling. Everything he had been told about humans, everything the Council had assumed was wrong. These were not a primitive species that could be guided and controlled. These were not thieves who had merely copied Keltharian work. These were genuine innovators who had taken a single example of advanced technology and used it as a springboard to reach heights that had taken the Keltharian Empire millennia to achieve. "What do you want?" Kelran asked finally, his voice heavy with defeat. Elena answered. "We want to be part of the galactic community. We want to trade with other species, learn from them, share with them. We want to explore the universe. And we want to do it as equals, not as subjects or junior partners." She gestured at her schematics. "We are offering to share our innovations with the Keltharian Empire. Some of our improvements to warp technology might be valuable to you. In exchange, we would like access to star charts, information about other species, and formal diplomatic recognition." Kelran looked at the human woman for a long moment. In her tired face and determined eyes, he saw something that the Keltharian Empire had not encountered in thousands of years. He saw a species that could not be intimidated or controlled. A species that would find its own path forward no matter what obstacles were placed in their way. A species that might actually live up to the potential that every sentient race possessed but few ever realized. "I will take your offer to the High Council," he said quietly. "But I cannot promise they will accept. You have challenged assumptions that have guided Keltharian policy for our entire spacefaring history." Elena nodded. "We understand. And Ambassador, one more thing." She pulled up another display, this one showing a sleek vessel that looked like nothing in Keltharian records. "This is our prototype warp ship. We are calling it the Pioneer. It will launch its first test flight in 4 weeks. You and any Keltharian observers are welcome to attend. We want you to see what we have built. We want you to understand that humanity is ready to join the galaxy." The meeting concluded shortly after. Kelran returned to his ship in a state of shock, carrying with him documentation and data that would shake the foundations of Keltharian confidence. He sent his report to the High Council with a single recommendation attached. "Accept the human offer. Accept it immediately. Because if we make enemies of this species, we will regret it for as long as the Empire endures." 4 weeks later, the Pioneer sat on a launch platform in the Nevada desert. It was not a large ship by Keltharian standards, only about 50 meters long. But it represented something far larger than its physical size. It represented human determination, human ingenuity, and human refusal to accept limitations imposed by others. Zarathal stood among a small group of Keltharian observers who had been invited to witness the test flight. She had watched the humans build this vessel piece by piece over the past weeks, and she still found it difficult to believe what she was seeing. 8 weeks. From initial discovery to a functional warp-capable vessel in 8 weeks. It had taken the Keltharian Empire 3,000 years. Elena stood nearby wearing a flight suit. She would be piloting the Pioneer herself, along with a crew of 3 other humans. When Zarathal approached her, the human woman smiled warmly. "Chief Science Officer Zarathal, I'm glad you could be here. Your reports helped us understand some of the finer points of warp field stability." "You read my reports?" Zarathal asked in surprise. Elena's smile widened. "Ambassador Kelran was kind enough to share them with us after we agreed to exchange information. Your insights into quantum foam interactions were particularly helpful. We made several adjustments based on your research." The Keltharian observer felt a strange mixture of emotions. Pride that her work had been useful. Concern that she had inadvertently helped the humans succeed. And something else, something she had not felt in many years. Excitement. The kind of excitement that came from witnessing something truly new and unprecedented. "Dr. Vasquez, may I ask what you hope to achieve today?" Elena looked up at the Pioneer with an expression of pure joy. "Today we hope to prove that humanity belongs among the stars. We hope to show that we can walk beside species like yours as equals. And we hope to begin a journey that will take us places we have only dreamed about." She extended her hand in the human gesture of friendship, and this time Zarathal took it. "Good luck," the Keltharian said sincerely. "Thank you." Elena squeezed her hand gently, then turned and walked toward the Pioneer. Her crew followed, and within minutes they had boarded the vessel. The launch platform cleared. Countdown sequences began. And then, with a sound like thunder and a flash of light that made everyone shield their eyes, the Pioneer activated its warp drive. The vessel did not simply fly away. It folded space around itself, compressed the distance between where it was and where it wanted to be, and moved faster than light. In an instant it vanished from Earth. 3 minutes later, it reappeared in orbit around Mars, having traveled millions of kilometers in less time than a human heartbeat. The crowd erupted in cheers. Humans embraced each other, weeping with joy and pride. Even some of the Keltharian observers found themselves making sounds of approval, caught up in the moment despite themselves. Zarathal watched as the Pioneer completed several more jumps, each one more complex than the last. The vessel moved with a grace and efficiency that impressed her deeply. The humans had not just copied Keltharian technology. They had understood it, improved it, and made it their own. Later that day, after the successful test flight had concluded and Elena had returned to thunderous applause, Zarathal sent her final report to the High Council. She had spent weeks trying to understand what made humans different, what made them capable of such rapid advancement. Now she thought she understood. The humans succeed because they embrace chaos, she wrote. Where we Keltharians value order, methodology, and careful progression, humans thrive in collaborative chaos. They argue and debate and challenge each other constantly. They approach problems from every angle simultaneously. They make intuitive leaps that seem reckless but somehow lead to breakthroughs. They fail frequently but learn from each failure with astonishing speed. Most importantly, she continued, they do not accept limitations. When told something is impossible, they do not believe it until they have tried and failed themselves. And even then, they simply try a different approach. This makes them frustrating, unpredictable, and occasionally infuriating. But it also makes them capable of achievements that more cautious species would never attempt. My recommendation is clear. The Keltharian Empire should embrace humanity as an ally and partner. Not a subject species to be guided. Not a threat to be contained. But equals who will push us to be better than we are. Because if we do not, some other species will. And we will lose the opportunity to learn from the most innovative species the galaxy has seen in millennia. 3 days later, the Keltharian High Council voted. For the first time in their history, they agreed to a formal treaty of complete equality with a species that had been spacefaring for less than 2 centuries. The Treaty of Mars, as it came to be called, recognized humanity as a full member of the galactic community with all rights and privileges. Elena Vasquez and Grand Chancellor Vector signed the treaty aboard the Pioneer, which had become a symbol of human achievement and determination. As they completed the ceremony, Vector said something that would be quoted in history books for generations to come. The Keltharian Empire has spent 10,000 years perfecting our civilization. We believed we had reached the pinnacle of what was possible. Today, the humans have shown us that there are always higher peaks to climb. We welcome them not just as allies but as teachers. Elena smiled at those words. And we welcome the chance to learn from you as well, Chancellor. After all, you have 10,000 years of knowledge that we are eager to explore. Together, perhaps we can achieve things that neither of our species could accomplish alone. The Pioneer departed Earth 6 months later on its first deep space mission, carrying a mixed crew of humans and Keltharians. Zarathal volunteered to serve as the ship's chief science officer, leaving behind her comfortable position in the Empire to explore the unknown alongside the strange, chaotic, brilliant humans who had changed everything she thought she knew about the universe. As the ship engaged its warp drive and leaped into the darkness between stars, Zarathal stood on the bridge beside Elena and felt something she had not felt in decades. Hope. Not just for humanity or the Keltharian Empire, but for every species in the galaxy. Because if humans could accomplish so much in such a short time, what might the entire galactic community achieve if they worked together, learning from each other's strengths and supporting each other's weaknesses? The universe suddenly seemed much larger and full of possibilities than it had before. And that, Zarathal realized, was perhaps the greatest gift humanity had given the galaxy. Not their technology or their innovations, but their unshakable belief that anything was possible if you were willing to work hard enough, think creatively enough, and refuse to give up no matter how impossible the challenge seemed. The Pioneer jumped to warp speed and disappeared into the cosmos, carrying that belief with it to stars that had never known human footsteps. Behind it, Earth continued to spin in the darkness, home to a species that had proven they belonged among the stars. Not because they were stronger or more advanced than anyone else, but because they possessed something that could not be measured or quantified. The determination to reach for the impossible and the creativity to turn it into reality. In the end, that was what made them truly unstoppable.